Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
Basketball or corporate America or at the gas station, complacency will get you replaced. And, that's one thing I would echo to them, and they would echo to each other. So, again, just challenging them and just trying to make sure they understand that you're going to be everybody's, state championship game every night. Being able to put them through the grind and prepare them for that. Work that harder in the preseason, work that harder in the off season. Because you got to understand what you created. Everybody wants a party, and so our guys just responded. And one of the big things with our guys was that every year the senior group, it would always be looked upon like, okay, it's on your watch now. Don't let it drop. The year before, that the group that left would say, hey, it's on you guys now. Don't, and so it's kind of like a built-in pressure. And it was a good pressure, but when those guys finally won it, those guys, you can see the pressure relief of, wow, it didn't happen on our watch.
Sharman White is the boys' head varsity basketball coach and associate director of athletics at Pace Academy in Georgia. White has been a high school coach for 20 seasons, and he owns a career high school head coaching record of 373 and 91. 11 of those seasons were as the head boys basketball coach and athletic director at Miller Grove High School in Lithonia, Georgia. At the helm of Miller Grove, White went 268-60, including 6 straight state championships. The 2014 USA Today All-USA Coach of the Year, White guided Miller Grove to the 2009 through 2012 Georgia Class 4A titles and the 2013 and 2014 Georgia Class 5A championships. His final season at Miller Grove in 2015-16 was one of his most impressive, as his team finished 31-3 and earned a bid to the Dix National Tournament. He was named the 2016 National High School Coaches Association Coach of the Year. Prior to arriving at Miller Grove, White coached at Carver High School in Georgia. In his final season at Carver, he was named the 2004 Georgia Class 5AA Coach of the Year after leading his team to a regional title and the state championship game. Coach White left Miller Grove and spent 2 seasons as a Georgia State assistant coach. White helped the team to a 44-24 record, including a 24-11 campaign and NCAA tournament appearance in 2017-2018. Coach White has also served as a court coach at the 2018 USA Basketball Men's U17 World Cup Team Training Camp. He was a gold medal winning assistant coach for USA Basketball at the 2015 FIBA Americas U16 Championship, and he has been a coach at the 2014 and 2015 USA Basketball Men's Junior National Team October mini camps. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the Hoop Heads podcast. That helps other members of the basketball community just like you find our show. Be prepared to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Coach Sharman White from Pace Academy in the state of Georgia.
Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel, and tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast Coach Sharman White from Pace Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. Sharman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We are excited to have you on, get a chance to pick your brain. You've done a lot of great things in the game of basketball. We want to be able to draw those things out and be able to share some great information with our audience. So we want to start by going back to the time when you were a kid and how you got into the game of basketball and what made you fall in love with it.
Well, as a kid, I loved the game. And the funny part about it was, and I tell the story all the time, when I was a kid and, I played a little bit, but I coached little kids in my neighborhood, just didn't knowing that I was going to be a coach. And everybody would say, you're going to be a coach one day. People would say that, but I just thought I was just, having fun with it. And as I could continue to progress, finish college and it was something that I knew I wanted to do, and it was a way for me to have a direct line with basketball. I tell people all the time, I'm a better coach than I ever was a player, but it's something that has stuck with me, and that I've had a lot of great experiences with, and coming up, again, um, it was just something that just stuck with me, and it's been great.
What was it about coaching, even from a young age? What was it about the process of coaching those young kids back in the neighborhood? And then obviously, as you progress through the different levels of basketball that you've been able to get to, what is it about the coaching process, or what was it back at that time that really made you say, hey, this is what I want to do with my life?
Well, I mean, it wasn't even something that I thought I wanted to do. It was just fun to do, like getting people to do something and having success. You know what I mean? Like even little kids at that time, and I was a kid myself, but just saying, hey, you go here and you go here, and you gotta be smarter and do just different things, and then to see the success of that, it just made it something that gravitated toward me. And then I think coaching has a lot of mentoring in it. So as I grew up, I always was a camp counselor during the summers, and I've always been around kids. I had a lot of nieces and nephews because I was the youngest out of six, and so I've always gravitated toward kids and being able to try to help them and mentor them, and so it just kind of flowed one and the other. I thought I was gonna be an accountant when I got to college. I was just set on being an accountant. I love math. And then, one day I got a chance to work with a young kid, and I said, nah, I know what I'm going to do, and so kind of one thing led to another, and, here it is. And so I just continue to grow in the game, and just continue to, definitely sharpen my sword with it. But, it just I just kind of gravitated toward it.
So your first job when you got out of school was coaching at a middle school, correct?
That's correct. At
So if you
Buzz Middle
talk,
School.
yeah, so talk a little bit about what that experience was like, because I know that one of the things that when I started going back and looking at your story and kind of researching and finding out a little bit more about you, that's one of the things that I think is probably to me one of the most interesting things about your backstory is the fact that you spent 5 or 6 years coaching middle school, and a lot of times people think of, oh, this middle school coach and they this and that, and a lot of times middle school coaches don't maybe get the respect they deserve, and the fact that you were able to start at that level and work your way up to the levels that you've been able to attain. Talk a little bit about what that first experience was like for you coaching at the middle school.
Well, actually, when I first started, I worked as an assistant from the guy who was the head coach. He was an older guy. And after the end of the first season, I worked with him. I asked him, could I, volunteer and work with him? And he was like, sure. And so at the end of that first season, I worked with him. He asked me, he said, hey, do you want to take this over? Because, he was kind of at the end of his career. And he said, I was the guy that could probably, take it over and do some great things with it. And so I took it over, and, I was a head coach at the middle school level for 6 years and had a lot of success. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth there, because I had a lot. You bump your head a little bit, you learn a lot. I was going to clinics at the time. I can remember going to the University of Kentucky clinic when Tubby Smith was the coach, and I remember he had Tayshaun Prince and a couple other guys that were really really good. And I remember just starting that process of saying, okay, if I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do it at a high level, I've got to learn from some good coaches, and I got to go out and keep sharpening my skills and my tools in the toolbox, so that I'll be able to lead some guys in the right direction and help them develop.
What were some of your biggest challenges in those early years when you were first, all of a sudden now you're in charge of those 12 or 15 kids, whatever it was, and they're looking at you and they're saying, all right, coach, what are we going to do? What were some of those challenges that you had in those first early couple of years that probably now you'd look back and say, I would have known how, now I know how to handle that, but maybe at the time, things that presented a challenge to you?
Probably just my first year we suffered quite a few losses, and so it did have me at a point where I was like, okay, we can't continue to do this. I can't continue to lose games. Um, but it made me work harder. It made me look at the game a lot, in a totally different way. As soon as let's say that first season, I think we won maybe like 3 out of 12 games or something like that. And after that first season, I studied even harder. I got in the gym even more, trying to work with guys and trying to make sure that I was, in a good position to continue to develop and get better as a coach. And so I went to the Nike clinics. And the funny thing about it, the quick story about the Nike clinics, I can remember going to the Nike clinics during the spring after my first year, and I kept telling myself one day I'm gonna be up here speaking, at these clinics, and years later, when that happened, it was kind of like it came full circle. But back to what I was saying, I mean, just trying to learn from the experience of losing and trying to say, okay, how do I want to correct that? What do I need to do? Of course, you got to have, some better players, and you can say that, but at the end of the day, even with good players, you still have to be able to put them in position to be successful. And that's what I really try to stress upon. And I stress that to younger coaches now. You might not have the greatest talent, but, maybe you do. But the key is you got to put them, with regards to their talent level, put them in the best position to be successful. And that's what you're charged with.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's a key point. And one of the things that I pull out of what you just said is the fact that you took the time to invest in yourself as a coach and knew that there were areas that you wanted to get better at and improve. And I think that's one of the things that if you're a young coach out there listening to this, or, even an older coach, the best in the business are always out there learning and trying to grow, because the game is constantly evolving. And as the game evolves, we as coaches have to do the same thing. If we want to continue to be successful, we have to continue to expose ourselves to new ideas and new mentors and new people that can, again, keep us fresh so that we can be as successful as we're hoping to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, I tell younger coaches that now, like I always tell them, always keep your blades sharp. And I always say that by, always trying to learn the new thing. Like I've, just as an example, myself, like the years I've been coaching, I haven't been a switch guy. I've always been, I don't want to switch. I don't want to be a guy that switches on defense. I want us to be able to guard ball screens and be able to get back to our man. And the game has changed to where now, the way guys are developed, the way guys are being taught, you might have a 6'5" kid that can guard a 6-foot guard, and so, or he's in a position where, you want them the opposite team to be able to try to take advantage of that. And if they can't, you win with the switching. So I've never been a switch guy, but now I'm way more receptive to it. We do it a lot at the school at Pace Academy. And again, it's just the game evolving itself that makes you, you have to adjust your game and adjust what you do.
What do you see as, just to go along with that particular kind of thought, what are some of the biggest changes in the game that you've seen? Obviously, the volume of 3-pointers compared to when you started coaching, I'm sure, is much higher. But what other things have you seen that where the game has changed over time since the time you started off as, as a middle school coach or as your first year as a high school coach?
I just think the game has definitely shifted more to the offensive side. I think it's more catered to the offensive side. And that's not bad because people want to be entertained and people want to see guys scoring the basketball. But I grew up on the defensive side of the ball. And so I've always taken a lot of pride in the defensive side. But I think now it's like, defense is still, top in some people, in some people's book. But I think for the most part, it's kind of faded away to where now it's more about the offensive side and how can we score? What can we do to score? And I've always thought that, it's all about stopping people. I remember read a quote from Dean Smith. I used it for a lot of years. If we score, we might win, but if the other team never scores, we never lose, and it was about defense. And so, again, I think that is what I see most prevalent now. Everything's kind of geared, even with the officiating, even with the changes in the rule. I don't understand why college doesn't have a 5-second, count, closely guarded. Like that bothers me because you're not going to reward a guy who's putting on extreme ball pressure, so that's
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
2 cents on it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. How would you say that today's system of developing players from from an AAU standpoint and just the sheer volume of basketball skill development that's out there. One of the things we've talked to some other coaches about, and I want to curious to get your opinion on it. I think there's a better depth of talent than there might have been 20 years ago, meaning that the 12th or 13th man on your roster now is probably a more skilled player, not necessarily a better player when it comes to IQ and decision making and that kind of thing, but maybe has more skills with the ball or is a better shooter than kids, let's say 20 years ago, simply because of the amount of, again, training and the amount of playing that's available to kids today. And yet I still think that for some of the top players who used to play on the playground against older guys or whatever the case might be, that the system I don't think is better for those top players, but I think for players, 8 through 12 or 8 through 15 on a roster, I think those players are more skilled than players 20 years ago. What's your thought on that?
I agree. I totally agree. I think, the level of development has, in some cases, it does take a hit because it's a lot of, trainers out there that, they're not really training or developing. They're just, got guys in the gym. And you see it all the time. I think Greg does a good job making sure.
He does a great job not letting anybody get away with anything.
What that looks like with the AAU bingo and the guys working with 17 tennis balls and, things of that nature. But, again, I do agree, though. I believe that, guys 8 through 12 or what have you, they have gotten better. And, again, it's funny you say that because we got 12 on our team. And, I've called on different guys at different points of the season. And that doesn't mean just the 1 through 8 guys. I've called on the 11th guy. He's come in the game and gave us a boost or gave us a play where before you don't even really, I can remember times you didn't even look that way unless you were up by a lot or down by a lot. But because of the skill level, these guys, that the skill level has risen, you can count on those guys. You can get something out of them. And so it does. I think it helps the game to a certain extent. Not all the bootleg stuff that I was talking about a few minutes ago, but just from the development standpoint, trying to develop, the whole kid and develop, more kids. I do think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's been something that's good for the game. When you get people with good coaches, I think that's one of the things that you always worry about. I'm sure you worry about as a high school coach, just when you see some of the programs, some of the trainers, like we talked about a second ago, that are doing things that, maybe aren't really helping to develop their kids. But there's certainly much more opportunity for kids to play in an organized setting than there was 15 or 20 years ago. So let's go back to that time when you finished coaching at the middle school and you get the opportunity to coach for the first time at the high school varsity level at Carver. And can you talk about the process of how you ended up with that job? And then when you walked in the door that first day, what were a couple things that you thought, boy, here in my program, these are the non-negotiable things that I'm going to have, that we're going to hang our hat on day in, day out if we want to have the kind of program that I believe we're going to have?
Well, that was an interesting story because my last year at Bunch, I was interviewing for the head job at North Atlanta High School, which was a pretty astute high school. It still is in the Atlanta area, and it was in the Atlanta public school system. It was probably one of the premier high schools, and I had actually accepted the job, taken the job. I was interviewed, accepted, taken it, and I even had a nice intro meeting with the parents. Got a chance, and this was all in the summer, like in June. So I was working out with the kids. I put them in the summer league. We played a couple games, won some games. Everything was going great. And then the principal that hired me there was moved to another school. And so the principal that they brought in allowed the previous coach, who I was replacing, to be allowed back to his position as head coach. And I was kind of like, basically thrown off,
wow, that's crazy.
Thrown out of my butt. Like
that is crazy.
Yeah. And so the principal that hired me at North Atlanta, who had gotten, transferred, he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, I'm over here at, Carver High School." And, Carver was the exact opposite of North Atlanta. It was like when North Atlanta was the premier school, Carver was like the school everybody was basically running from. And he said, "I have a basketball position open. You're more than welcome. I'm sorry what happened, but you're more than welcome to take this position." And it was like, I was like, it's like I'm going from Bel Air to Afghanistan. And so that's just the honest truth about it. It wasn't, it wasn't a good area. It wasn't great things about that area that made me just, be excited about it. But I talked it over with a couple of my mentors, and most of them were like, "Hey, this is a great opportunity. This will be your first head high school coaching job, and that don't mean you got to be there a long time. You just want to go in there and get your feet wet." And so I kept listening to that, and I said, "Okay, well, I'll give it a try." And so I went in, and again, mind you, this team had won 3 games the year before I got there, and so the program was on hard times, and so I just went in and with an open mind, and I can remember the first day I walked in, and guys looking around saying, "Hey, are you the head coach?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I started finding out who were the guys that were there, that played previously. And so once I did, I started rallying those guys together. But my thing was, I wanted to create a standard, because I inherited that program. And so a little bit different than Miller Grove. Miller Grove was a brand new school when I opened, but this one, I had to take what was there and say, all right, we're going to build a culture from what we got instead of establishing a culture brand new from the start. And so I wanted to do that, and these kids, I think the biggest thing that I recognized, from day one was they just wanted someone that cared, somebody that could mentor them, because they were good players and they were great athletes. I mean, those kids walking around the school 6'5" and 6'6", and then I find out that, they don't have any grades, or they don't come to school half the time. So I try my best to rally those guys and rally, the different kids on a team, and try to, show them that I'm there, not just as a coach, but there to try to support them as a mentor, and, as an adult, So we were able to, get some kids together, and they worked hard for me. Once they saw that I cared, and that it was genuine, they worked extremely hard for me. And it's crazy because that first year, we lost our first 6 games, and we were close. We were in every game, but we lost the first 6 games, and then we finally won some. And then when we started winning, I think their whole mindset, it just went to another level. And so we ended up going to the state playoffs. We got into the state playoffs, and we upset the number 1 seed, and we beat them by nearly 40. And it kind of woke everybody up around the city and the state and said, hold up, these guys are for real. And we really had a pretty good team. It wasn't like it was a bad team. It was just I finally got them going in the direction that needed to be going toward that end of the season. So we were able to knock off. We went all the way to the Elite Eight. We were 2 games away from the state championship, but we had a record of 11-17, and so that set the tone for that program. It was back. That Carver program, which was rich in history, was back. And so that's kind of how I got going, man. And we went on the next year, and we ended up, we went to the state playoffs again, won the regular season region championship. And then the last year I was there, the third year I was there, we lost in the state championship game. So it's kind of like we took that program from the ashes and were able to, get it back to the status that they had been used to back in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
So how do you go about building those relationships that you talked about? What is it that you do on a daily basis, whether it's, in the school, during practice? Just how do you go about building those kinds of relationships that get those kids to go from what had been a losing environment to a winning environment? What is it about what you do or how you do it that allows you to build that relationship?
I think it's 2 things. It comes down to just time, spending time with them, whether it's, after weights or, shagging rebounds from them shooting the ball, just talking to them, and communication. I think, learning about them, trying to get inside their world and see what's going on, taking them home and, seeing what their life is like, where they're going to, and, taking them to my house. I've taken a few of my players, to my mom's house and let them, my mom cook dinner for them and things of that nature, but just extending myself, I was a single man at the time, wasn't no married, no kids. So I was able to do a lot of those things. Whereas, I was able to spend the kind of time with them that a lot of times they, coming from single parent homes, and sometimes, even, worse than that, and just pouring myself into them and letting them see, being transparent with them and tell them when they're wrong and, correcting them and still, loving on them, but just making sure they understand, what this life is about and how they got to, prepare themselves and try to be successful, be a successful fragment of a society.
Yeah, I think that's a key to any coach's success, if you're really going to have an impact on kids, I think what I heard you say right there was nothing about the game of basketball. It was really about impacting those kids' lives off the court, and not just to make them better basketball players, but to make them better people and to give them an opportunity to have success moving forward. So how important is that teaching of life lessons and developing that in your players, teaching them how to be men, for lack of a better term? How important is that to what you try to do on a daily basis in any of the spots that you've been?
I think it's the most important thing. I mean, I think, I'm a big character guy. I've always been a big John Wooden fan. Studied a lot of his stuff. I know he was a character coach, but I wanted to teach my guys about the game of life, and I feel like if I did that, the basketball would take care of itself. If they listen to me and believe me on the things I spoke about, as far as how they need to handle themselves and how they need to be high character people, like you said, you're building men. That's what it is. I like that term because that's what this position for me was about. Like I say, I love basketball and I'm a basketball junkie, but I think building their lives up first, it sets the tone for whatever you can do with them basketball wise. And so I've always told parents, that's one thing I even from my days at Carver, you give me your boy, I'm gonna give you back a man. And I pride myself on that because that's about trying to uh, let them see the world through the eyes of someone who's lived it a little bit longer. But uh, I believe that championship people win championships, and so and I'm not just talking about that trophy at the end of the season, although that is something that I do believe in competing and fighting for and all that stuff. But I think that character is the big thing, and so I can remember one of John Wooden's best quotes that I really love, and I speak about it every time I get around a group of people that I'm speaking to. But character will get you to the top. Your ability to get you to the top, but your character will keep you there. And so I've always been big on that. And being able to use guys, being able to tell guys about different guys that had all the talent in the world and they got to the top, but once they got there, they couldn't stay there because their character wouldn't allow them to. And so, again, I just think at the end of the day for me, and I'd say this everywhere I go, it's a ministry, man. It really is. It's just, it happened to be basketball. If it would have been, the cruise ship leader at McDonald's, that's what it would have been. But thank God
Yep.
it's
Yep.
basketball.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, again, today, that type of coaching is far more prevalent than it was maybe back in the day when you or I were growing up. And it's just great to hear that people like you are using basketball as a means to an end, where not only are you having success on the court, but you're also molding the types of citizens that are going to go out into society and have success. And that's really what it's all about. So if you think back to, you get to the state championship game, your last season at Carver. So obviously you've got the program going in the direction that you wanted to. Most coaches would be, obviously want to win that last game, but still you obviously steered the ship in the right direction. So talk about the opportunity that came by at Miller Grove. Obviously it was a brand new school. Talk about the decision-making process to leave Carver, go to Miller Grove, and what some of the challenges were you faced starting a program basically from scratch.
And I can remember while I was at Carver, those last, right before Miller Grove, the guy who was going to become the principal, he knew someone that knew me. And so they reached out and said, would I be interested in talking with them about, this brand new school, in DeKalb County called Miller Grove. And so, and at the time for me, luckily it was a good time because I was also being courted by schools in different counties. I think I had like maybe 8 offers, but this Miller Grove offer kind of intrigued me the most because I didn't have to come in and inherit a program. I could start a program from scratch, which again, that being able to do that, that was a blessing for me because now I can say from day one, this is what we want to do. I don't have to go in and try to change and try to, uh, manipulate the mindset that I want, it can be established from everyone that walks through that door. And so they interviewed me. They told me I was their guy, and I told them I was their man. And so it was a match made. And again, it was to be able to start a program from scratch. We only had 9th and 10th graders my first year, and so even with that, because every year they added a grade, but just to be able to start it at that point and be able to build it, and again, everybody knows the old adage, if you build it, they'll come, but the thing about it was, that area was a talent rich area. So it wasn't like it was, it wasn't guys popping in from any and everywhere. It was already a talent rich area. But with a new school, when you got other schools that are there in the area that are established powerhouses, it's kind of tough, And so we had to kind of take the leftovers from the guys that didn't want to be at those schools and say, hey, we're going to just try to build it with these guys. But we were able to do it. Those guys, they were the bricklayers. And I still have a relationship with all those guys. And I always tell them, all the success we had at Miller Grove, you guys were the ones who laid the bricks and made it possible. And so I would always bring those guys around for practices, for open runs, and because I never wanted those guys to feel like, they were forgotten or they were, they were too big in the process not to be maintained and, being able to stay a part of the program. And so, again, I think that was a heaven sent.
So you said you only had 9th and 10th graders your first year. Is that what you said? So did you field only a varsity team, or what was the process like that?
We filled up. What we called it was a JV varsity team. That's the way we looked at it. Because we played some JV games, but we also played some varsity region games. So we were involved in the region, but they allowed us to play in the region playoffs. We got special permission to play in the region playoffs. And the funny part about it, we upset a team in the first round of the region playoffs that, was a traditional, they were a regular school, 9 through 12. We were brand new, and when they allowed us to play in it, of course, everybody didn't get mad. They got mad that
they got mad when they didn't mind you playing because they thought you were playing the game, and then they lose, and then they weren't happy about it.
Oh man, they weren't happy about it at all. But it set the precedence for our program. Our kids at that point believed, they really did. And then we ended up getting the best player in the area. He went to our feeder middle school, and we were worried about losing him to private schools and all this. And his mom, I can remember his mom's name was Mufanya Dofia. He ended up going to Georgia Tech, scored over 2,500 points for us there. But I can remember talking to his mom, and she said, you know what, I'm going to keep him in his area. I want him to lift up his area. I don't want to send him somewhere else and raise up another area. I want him to do it in his own neighborhood, in his own school. And so when he came, it really did make a big mark in our development, and a big mark as far as us being on the map, because he came in as a freshman and was, he was in a situation like that, when you only got now 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, and him being a freshman, no seniors, you got something good there. And so it really did take off from there.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe just in general the challenges of coaching at a public school and kind of competing with private schools in the area? Because I know that's one of the things here in Cleveland that, there's always talk about back and forth with, the fairness of private schools competing with public schools, and just the, the process of, when I was a kid, I went to public school, and I never really had a thought about going to a private school. But there are a lot of people that sort of think differently about it. So can you talk a little bit about those challenges that you might face as a public school coach, compared to what it might be like to coach at a private school where you are, like what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, public school and again, public school is a different type of, I call it a different type of animal, because, you don't have the resources that you would, at least at the school I was at, we didn't have the resources that you would normally have. And so, you are fighting with the private school some, because of the fact that, they can provide more than likely a better education. And also they have the resources to make, what they have more attractive to any parent or kid. So yeah, we did have to fight with it some early on with that kid I'm speaking of, but when we started to build and started to win, those problems or being able not have we didn't have to fight with them as much or basically any. But I do know what that's like though, because I have buddies in this business, and again, as a parent myself, and guys, the people that are parents, one of our biggest missions as a parent is to put our children in the best possible situation to succeed. And so I do understand if, a parent says, hey, I think this private school setting would be better for my child for all these reasons. They have that right, and it's not fair to a coach or what have you, but, a coach sees a player, a parent sees their child. And so they're going to do those things that are going to put them, that they feel are best for their child. And so I just, again, I haven't had to fight that battle a whole lot. And it's funny because I'm on the other side of it now. And so that's a selling point for me as a coach and an associate athletic director is, being able to give the kid the kind of education that could be, beneficial, extremely beneficial for him moving forward. And not only that, but just, overall. And so, it's funny, I never saw myself as a private school coach. I never saw myself going to a private school. Not that, I didn't think, it could happen, but I just never saw it happening. And so now that I'm here, it's a whole different mindset and a whole different way I look at it, but it's been great, and so, that's pretty much how it was.
What are the biggest differences that you see between being a public school coach and now being a private school coach? What are the big things that jump out at you as like, wow, this is different?
Well, it's the process of getting players and having guys, to come to the school, what have you, is a little bit different because it's a process, more of a process. Whereas with a public school here in Georgia, if the kid moves in the area, they're automatic granted eligibility. Whereas with a private school, you not only, you got to get eligibility, but you got to get admitted into the school. So it's a twofold process. And so, and they're not going to just take any kids, which, again, I understand that. And so that just makes it a little bit, it makes it a little bit more challenging. But at the same time, I think it's good because when you have standards and when you have a certain culture, you want people that are going to fit in that culture. And I think, again, those things are what parents look at. That's what they kind of view from the standpoint of why they want their kids there. But for me, it's again, I can see differences in that, but I also, again, I always going to resort to tell you about the resources that they have. It's probably more than most public schools that you're going to see around here. And so that makes the job a little bit easier. I tell people all the time, when you're in a public school, man, you got to do a lot of things. When you talk about raising monies and you talk about doing different things, I remember we took our teams to different places. We took our team to Hawaii for the tournament out in Hawaii one year, and we had to literally, we had to raise. That
was a full-time job to raise money for that trip.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the school I'm at now, that it won't be that same type of challenge, And so, just those little subtle differences, but they make they make for a big difference.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, Alan Stein Jr.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
Registration is now open at www.headstartbasketball.com for this summer's Head Start basketball camps. We'll be hosting camps this summer in Strongsville, Westlake, Avon Lake, Oberlin, Brunswick, Highland Heights, Mentor, and Hudson. At Head Start Basketball, we care deeply about making a positive impact on the lives of young basketball players, both on and off the court. It's through building strong relationships with our players, parents, and coaching staff that we are able to use the game of basketball to enrich the lives of those we interact with, both inside and outside of our organization. We believe that our attention to detail, our growth mindset, and our commitment to lifelong learning allows us to help our players achieve their fullest potential. We are passionately committed to providing players, parents, and coaches with everything they need to reach their goals. These core values run through everything we do. Check out our website, www.headstartbasketball.com, and discover why you should attend a Head Start basketball camp this summer. Hope to see you there.
Can you talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned a couple times about parents and wanting the best situations for their kids. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done at your various stops to keep your parents engaged and get them to be a part of the program and buy into what you're doing with their kids?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing, I'm always telling younger coaches this, the biggest thing with parents is I think you have to communicate. You have to have a line of communication with them. Most times, and I've learned this, just through coaching myself, if you talk with them and you get to know them and you allow them to be able to talk to you and don't feel like you're above them and you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to. I think that's where the traction you get traction with that relationship and those relationships. And now when there's a challenge or when there's some difficult things, you've already established that you can talk, as two people or as one to another. And so I think communication is huge. I think because, again, like I said earlier, the parent sees their child. A coach sees a player. He can't be consumed with one child when there's 11 other kids on the team. And so, he has to do what he thinks is best for the group. And the parent just wants to what's best for their kid, and that's understandably so. But, again, I've always, been one to communicate with my parents, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've had, all my relationship with my parents have been, just, glorious and everything has been perfect. But, for the most part, they respect me and I respect them. And it's caused for me not to have, a lot of parental problems. I think the communication piece plays a big role in that, because if we can have a conversation that's not about, their child's playing time outside of, so when we do have to have that conversation about their playing time, those things are a little bit easier to talk about. And a lot of times when I'm finished talking with parents, we walk away laughing, and we might have had differences, but we walk away and we're on the same page. And so even up to where I'm at now, everybody wants their kids to play. Everybody wants their kid to be successful, and I get that, and I understand that. I want my kids to be the same way, but I deal in truth, and I think if you're gonna be successful as a coach, you have to deal in truth. If you deal in truth, you'll get further in this business, and you'll see a lot of good days.
Yeah, I think the communication piece is huge, especially when you talk about communicating before there's problems, just like you're a teacher in the classroom. And, if you could say something positive about somebody's child, then when they, when you do have to make that phone call that maybe is something that's, slightly negative or maybe a difficult conversation, it's a lot easier to have those difficult conversations when you have those lines of communication open in advance. And to me, any coach out there, that's a great piece of advice for them that you just shared, to get out ahead of problems by communicating and being upfront. And I think it's important to tell people the truth. Sometimes we have a tendency to want to sugarcoat things and maybe not tell people the raw, unvarnished truth that might hurt their feelings or something that they don't want to hear. But I think in the long run, what I found, and I think what you found and what most coaches find, is that if you're honest with people, even if it's not necessarily what they want to hear, they're much more likely to have respect for you and just to have things go smoothly, as you go through things with your program.
Absolutely. Again, dealing in truth, man, is everything to me. And I've been talking the last couple of days with some of my coaches about this, because, again, you don't want to, it's one thing to make a kid feel good, but sometimes the truth won't always make you feel good. And that's without berating, or that's without disrespecting any kid. Sometimes truth hurts, but when you walk away, that's the best thing for you, so you can understand exactly what's going on. And so, I'm a big proponent of that. Don Showalter is one of my mentors in this, and that's one thing when we're working with USA Basketball. I mean, that's one of the things we always try to make sure that goes forth is we're telling these kids the truth. And even for kids that on that skill level that qualify to be a part of that, they've never been cut from teams, and they've always been the best player on their team. But it might come a time, especially in that setting, where they're not good enough, or they might not be chosen. And so that's when, by you telling them the truth, it's more acceptable. And a lot of those kids, when they do get cut for the first time, through that process, they come back hungrier than ever. They want to redeem themselves. But if we were telling them a whole bunch of BS, they probably would be done with it. They don't want no other part of it. But these kids come back, trying to make it the next year, or trying to be a part of the next thing that's involved with it. So I just believe that speaking in truth, it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, for sure. I know we talked to Coach Showalter about that same thing that you just discussed, which is, he said that a lot of times when those kids get to, whether it's the junior national trials or the training camp, whatever it might be, and they hear, they hear for the first time, they hear the truth about something and about their game. And as a result of that, a lot of times they may not hear from their high school coach, because the high school coach might not want them to transfer or leave schools, and their AAU coach doesn't want them to leave and go play for another team. And so he talked about how oftentimes at USA basketball events, that's the first time when a lot of these high-level guys have heard some criticism of their game, because people around them in other places may be, I don't know if afraid's the right word, but just maybe reticent to share the truth with them. And so he said that's one of the things that at USA Basketball that he prides himself on, and that he prides the coaching staff on, is making sure that they're always telling the kids the truth. And I think that's a huge point that you make, and that is key to being a successful coach. If you're not telling people the truth about what you're seeing, then ultimately you're going to get yourself in trouble, and you're not going to be able to have this type of success that you want to have. Let me ask you about the USA Basketball piece and how you got involved with USA Basketball, and then what some of the different things are that you've done with them through the years.
Me and Don, we spoke on a lot of, we've spoken at Nike clinics together. And we got a chance to get to know each other pretty good. And, I would always, I would tell him, hey, I would love to be a part of if the opportunity presents itself, and all of that. But I think us having a good friendship kind of helped that. And I remember getting a call one day from, BJ Johnson, who was the director at the time, or the operations person at the time. He gave me a shout and asked me, was I interested in, coming to training camp. And I think that was in 2014. I came to training camp and got a chance to do one of the mini camps that fall, and had a great time. Learned a lot, was able to share a lot. And I got a call from Sean Ford maybe during December, or maybe early that part of January. He said, hey, we want you to be a part of the 16U coaching staff along with Miles Simons and Coach Show. And I was ecstatic. It was like almost a dream come true again, because that was one of those things you put on the list, say, hey, I would love to represent my country coaching. That's like, you got guys that go fight in wars, and they're taking bullets, and they're doing all these things and representing the country and protecting the country and serving the country. And you get to go do it, coaching basketball. It's not the same. I don't want to try to make a comparison, but you get a little small bit of that to be able to just coach and represent your country. And so I was thoroughly ecstatic about that. And so come in 2015, that summer, we had our training camp for junior national team, 16 and under. Then we went to Argentina. We won a gold medal, and I was able to be a part of that, win a gold medal. One of the best feelings I've ever had as a coach. One of the best experiences I ever had as a coach, and just been pretty much been a part of it. Even when I left to go, I started college in 2016. I still, I wanted to be a part of it, and so I was always speaking at the coaching academies. They would always have me at the coaching academy speaking, and when I did go back to high school, one of the first calls I got was from Don Showalter saying, "Hey, we got to get you back on staff. We got to get you back involved." And so I'm back involved and could be more happier.
What was it like to hear the national anthem played when you received your medal?
It was unreal. I mean, it's like a rush over your body, man. You see that stuff on TV. You see, the Dream Team, and you see all these Olympians that do this, and they stand up on that podium, and you get a chance to do that, and you see these young men that you've been with for over almost a month. You've seen them grow. You've seen them, be good. You've seen them not be good. You see all these things, and it's just an incredible feeling, man. And to be able to share with guys like Showalter and at that time Miles Simon, B.J. Johnson, Doc Parrish. I mean, it was just unreal, and all those great players, and a lot of those guys that I was fortunate enough to coach, they're pretty much all in the NBA. So, like, to be able to know those guys and teach them and try to, just have a small bit into their development or a small bit into their career is really gratifying for me.
Yeah, I'm sure. What was the travel like when you went to Argentina? Like a lot of those guys, I'm assuming that they probably hadn't been out of the country before. What was it like to go to a new culture with, with that group of 16-year-olds?
Oh man, it was it was interesting. It was interesting for me because I went to the Bahamas or I've been to
Right.
places like
Understood.
that. I've
Understood.
been I've not been to Argentina where it's when we leave, we fly out of Colorado Springs, it's like 80 degrees, and when we get there, it's like 30 degrees or 20 degrees, because of the different climate during that
Yep.
time
Yep.
of the year. So
Yeah.
it was and then the food. I'm not a big I'm pretty American when it gets to food, and so it was kind of like a little bit of a challenge for me. But like as long as Don Showalter loves steaks, so
Yep.
I
I
do as
see. I
much.
see him tweeting about
I was
steaks
gonna
all the
say, I
time.
was gonna say it's
Hey,
basketball at stakes with Don. I'm pretty sure.
hey, if we were going to, we pretty much were going to places that had steak. So I said, okay, I can do that. But but again, even for me and the players, it was because they were kind of like me. Most of the kids they don't. They're eating chicken wings or they're eating burgers
McDonald's.
and fries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
They're not experimenting too much with food at age
right.
16.
And so but just being able to adapt and try new things, I think it was good for everyone, including myself, just to try get out of my comfort zone uh, and that's big, getting out your comfort zone. That's where you really grow. And I think, even in that setting, even, just with the food or with, the culture itself and, even with the climate, I mean, you get out of your comfort zone and you're going to grow when that happens. And so I grew and I'm pretty sure those guys grew and it was a great experience.
Was there anything surprising about coaching the kids at that level? And obviously, you won 7 out of 8 state titles at one point at Miller Grove, so you obviously had a lot of talent there when you were coaching. But this was a whole different level of of talent that you were working with there with USA Basketball. So was there anything about those guys just kind of collectively that surprised you that maybe going into it you didn't think that I thought they were going to be one way but it turned out to be something else? What was surprising or interesting about coaching those kids?
Man, they're just regular kids. That's the biggest thing I can say. Like they're regular kids. I mean, you look at them now, you look at them on TV, you see guys like Wendell Carter, Gary Trent. You see all these guys, and you say, wow, But they were just regular kids, man. They wanted to learn. They wanted to get better. They were great character guys, and they were great teammates. And so when you take that, they all had the respect for the game and respect for the people that were in charge of them that you would want, when you're talking about representing the country and representing the United States. That's what they were about. And so when you walk away, it leaves a good feeling in your heart that, hey, the game is going to be in a good place, not just because of their talent, their skill, but because of what kind of people these guys are. Like I said earlier, you win championships with championship people, and they were championship people. And they, even, some of them, they might have had a bad day, or they might have, had a rough day, but it was always another guy there to pick them up. It was always someone there to kind of like, help them get through it. And when you notice that as a coach, sitting back from afar, it makes you feel good inside, because that lets you know, there are good people still in this world. As bad as some people might think it is, it's still the greatest place to be, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one for sure. Can you talk a little bit about how you built the culture? Because I know the teams together for, compared to what you have a high school team for the amount of time that you have a college team, you have those kids together for a very short amount of time. So can you talk about what you do to build a culture and build the team spirit and get those guys playing for each other in such a short period of time?
Yeah, I think it starts with expectations. I think you got to have those expectations in place. And, the expectations, that, they are what you want them to be. But I think what you stress is what you'll get out of kids. And if it's, and I can use basketball as an example, if you want them to be an unselfish team, that's what you got to preach. That's what you got to stress. But when I think about like the expectations, I think I've always been one to set high expectations for my teams. Even, I'm starting to. This is my first year at Pace, and I don't allow them to think anything less than just being the best team out there. Now, are we the best team in the state? No, we're not. But I don't want them to believe that they can't be. And so I think I set expectations, probably higher than what, you probably would think someone would coming into a first year program, because I don't believe in just, because I've always said, I'd rather aim high and miss than to aim low and hit, and so I believe that expectations set the standard in it. Again, you want to get to a place like Dabo says, you are the standard. You want to, play to your standard, and so if you set those standards high and you play to them, you're going to be successful. And so that's where it starts. That's where it starts for me, going into a new program. And, even at Miller Grove, same thing. I had high expectations. I told them, one of the things I told the first group, I said, look, we want to be a nationally recognized program. I didn't even know what a nationally recognized program was, because I never had been one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, but just set that bar, and, I got it. Before you know it, we were, playing in Dix, and we were, ranked nationally, and we were doing all these things, flying all over the country, playing in different things, Hoop Hall and all flying, City of Palms and all this stuff. And so there it was. And so I think it all begins with you as a coach, what you set before them. Kids will raise up to it. If you put the right things in place, they'll try their best to raise up to that standard or raise up to that expectation.
So obviously, when you're at Miller Grove and you win the first state title, what was that like? And then how did you go about then sustaining that excellence? You talked a little bit about the John Wooden quote, and I know I heard you talk on a couple other podcasts about the danger of fighting complacency once you get to the top. So can you talk a little bit about how you were able to sustain the success after that initial state championship at Miller Grove?
I always tell people, like, it's much harder to repeat than it is to win it for the first time. I think it takes a ton of character to repeat. Just challenging those guys year after year after year after year, just challenging them, putting different challenges before them, holding them to an even higher standard. You would think, okay, well, this group won a state championship. Well, the guys that are coming back, can you win it again? Don't you like this feeling? Don't you want to be, at a place where we can, do this again? So what do we have to do to make that happen, and kind of make them be in the position of understanding what that is and figuring that out. And then, again, from year to year, I would tell people all the time, it was not the easiest thing. Now, you can have great players and all that stuff, but it takes a lot. Winning the championship, you got to have a lot of luck in there too. And we've had a year where, Tony Parker goes down with a sprained left ankle and a sprained right foot. He walking around with 2 boots on, but we had other guys to step up and walk right into it, when he was out, and we were able to win a state championship. But all of them have been different routes and different ways. I can remember Tony Parker's senior year, 2012, we played the hardest schedule in the country. We played in the City of Palms, we played in Hoop Hall, we played in Bass Pro, we played Oak Hill on national TV to start the season off. I mean, we had an incredible schedule, and we ended up losing I think we lost 9 games that year. We played Simeon on ESPN at a Cancer Research Classic. That's with Jabari Parker, all those guys. And we had a really tough schedule, and we struggled. We didn't lose by a lot in those games. We were in every game, but we just could never finish it. But we brought it all together, and when we got back, to our regular schedule at our, in Georgia, and we put the finishing touches on it, we were able to win. And that was our 4th one in a row, which marked, a tie for the longest streak in the state. And so we went on to win 2 more consecutively after that to make it 6, which made it, the record in the state for most consecutive state championships for a boys team. And so, again, we, just being able to not allow for complacency. I used to always say that complacency will get you replaced. I don't care if it's basketball or corporate America or at the gas station, complacency will get you replaced. And, that's one thing I would echo to them, and they would echo to each other. So, again, just challenging them and just trying to make sure they understand that you're going to be everybody's, state championship game every night. Being able to put them through the grind and prepare them for that. Work that harder in the preseason, work that harder in the off season, because you got to understand what you created. Everybody wants a party. And so our guys just responded. And one of the big things with our guys was that every year the senior group, it would always be looked upon like, okay, it's on your watch now. Don't let it drop. The year before, the group that left would say, hey, it's on you guys now. Don't, and so it's kind of like a built-in pressure. And it was a good pressure, but when those guys finally won it, those guys, you can see the pressure relief of, wow, it didn't happen on our watch. So
yep.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So the group that when we won 6 in a row, we were going for 7. And I felt so bad for the group that we lost in the quarterfinals for number 7. I felt so bad for them because, most people are going to look at them. Even some of the former players are going to look, hey, you guys were the ones that dropped the ball. And I felt so bad for them. And I even had some of the guys to come in and talk with them and say, hey, it's okay. We had a great run. But it set the stage for the next year after we lost it after 6 in a row, because that group had a new hunger and they were really ready to go back after. So it was like winning our first state championship all over again for that group.
Yeah, that had to be a cool feeling. I mean, obviously you didn't want to lose number 7, but to be able to then bounce back and be resilient, what a good life lesson for the kids who were on both of those teams, to be able to look at it and say, hey, we fell short of what we wanted to accomplish the year before, but now here we are back on the podium, able to get to the very pinnacle of the state championship again. I can't think of a better life lesson for kids to be able to take away from that experience.
No doubt, man. And those kids, again, that group 2016, we came within 1 point. We lost to Oak Hill by 1 point in the semis of the Dix Nationals. Because, that was our goal for the beginning of the season. We want to, win the national championship, because we were one of the few states that were allowed to play in that. And so, for us to come back and win our state championship, but not let that be the main goal, that was part of the main goal, because we knew the only way we could get the Dix, we had to win the state championship. We had to have a good season. And we did both of those things. And once we got there, we knocked off Finley Prep in the first round. And we were the first public school, and still to this day, it's the first public school to win a game in that tournament. And so, to be able to do that and then take Oak Hill all the way down to 1 point loss, who they're eventually the champions because they ended up winning over Lawler. But it was just a great experience for our kids. It was a great, like you said, way to bounce back. It was a great life lesson, and I think those kids will never forget that. I know myself and our staff will never forget that. That school will never forget that run and how we just kind of showed some resiliency. And it would be fitting that was my last year and we were able to get our crown back.
So at the conclusion of that season, I'm assuming that over the course of time, as you're winning 7 out of 8 state titles, you had some inquiries from other places, whether that be high schools, colleges. And so at the end of that season, you decide that you're going to make a jump up to the college ranks and go to Georgia State and coach with Ron Hunter. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like, how you came to the decision that you wanted to leave high school and go to college coaching, and then what the process was for getting you to Georgia State?
Well, I had kind of had a couple flirts, so to speak, with a couple schools earlier in my career while I was at Miller Grove, in the middle of the runs, actually. And, for one reason or another, either I didn't feel like it was a good move or, I didn't get selected or what have you. This time, after 2016, I can remember interviewing with Georgia Tech. Josh brought me in. And I talked with them, and then right after that, Coach Hunter at Georgia State brought me in and wanted to talk to me about the position. And Coach Hunter's a great guy. I really enjoyed learning a lot up under him. And so he asked me would I be interested in coming to Georgia State. And I just felt like it was the right move because, it was a low risk move for me because I didn't have to move. I stayed in my same house, and my kids still went to their same school. And I knew this state backwards and forwards, so I knew I was going to be able to recruit and sign kids, which I was able to do. And sign, really good classes, and again, get that college experience and being able to coach on that college level, which was something that I did want to do. And so, yeah, it was great. Again, Coach Hunter was phenomenal. The staff was phenomenal. Was able to go to the NCAA tournament. So just got a lot of things done at that level in a short period of time. And it was great.
What was the biggest adjustment for you when you got to college? Well, obviously you went from being a head coach where you kind of control the program and make decisions and obviously take input from assistants and people, but ultimately the decision-making process ends with you. And then you get to college, you're an assistant, and you kind of have to, sublimate yourself to someone who is, the head coach. And so what was that adjustment like for you when you went from being a head coach in charge of a program to an assistant?
That was the biggest adjustment right off the bat, after 20 years of calling the shots basically. And now, they always say, as a head coach, you make the decisions, but as an assistant, you make suggestions. And that's, I was able to make that transition, but it wasn't easy for me personally because just being in that seat for so long. And so then, the other part to it was, the college game and the preparation that it takes to go out and win a college game was a lot more. And you had resources though that were really, really good, having synergy and having just play and being able to, put that thing together, the scouting reports and what have you to win a game. It was a lot more than what I was used to. We did scouting reports, we did film and all that stuff, but now you got the technology at the tips of, at your hand. And so now, you're able to kind of like break teams down even, further than I, could have ever thought to, just from even just small tendencies. But all of that, those things right there were different, but they were a good different for me because, again, even with me being an assistant coach, I had to get out of my comfort zone, and it allowed me to be able to grow as an assistant coach because I used to always pride myself as a head coach. I said I want to be, I want to work like an assistant, as a head coach. And that's what I prided myself on when I was a head coach during my tenure. So when I became assistant coach, I thought, hey, it'd be easy because I worked like an assistant coach. But, it was an adjustment. It definitely was an adjustment because there's a lot more to it than what I was, thinking and believing to be an assistant.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you like most about the college coaching, and then what did you like least about it?
It was I really like the games. The games are so much fun. The player development is really great because you get to spend, like high school, you don't get to spend the same amount of time with kids as you do on the college level. So you can see a kid go from A to Z in the course of just working with them the entire year. Whereas in the high school, you only got but certain periods of time you can work with a kid. Uh, that was very gratifying. That was great. Also, I enjoyed the recruiting aspect of it from the standpoint of the challenge of trying to go sign good players. And so, I was able to sign, 4 players that, 3 of them are starters now at Georgia State, and just to be able to sign good players. And the challenge of it to compete with the bigger schools. Last kid I signed at Georgia State before I left was Nelson Phillips, who was the player of the year in Georgia for his classification. But I had to fight off Mississippi State. I had to fight off Iowa State. But it was a challenge for me, and so that was fun. It was stressful, but it was fun. So those things are things that I can really look back and say that were really, really fun. I really enjoyed. I didn't enjoy the travel as much because I got younger kids and missing. Like I missed for 2 years. I basically missed all my son's basketball games, and I missed all my daughter's cheerleading competitions. And for me, at the age I'm at, I don't. That wasn't fun. I didn't want to look up one day and they were 18, and I say, what happened? I didn't see any of this, and so that was probably one of the bigger reasons why I decided, hey, maybe if I go back to high school and be able to kind of manage my own time and do what I need to do, I can spend more time with them and be more involved with them as they develop, especially with them getting into the areas that they were working in.
Yeah, I think that's a huge challenge for coaches. I know that's one of the things that when I talk to guys around here in Cleveland or we talk to people on the podcast, and inevitably people mention the fact that if you're really going to be successful as whether it's a high school coach or a college coach, it takes a lot of time, and I don't think the average fan, parent, player necessarily realizes how much time coaches put in, not just on the practice floor and on Friday night for a game, but there's so much that goes into it behind the scenes and time away from your family. And so I think the best coaches out there and the ones that have found that balance find ways to incorporate their family into their team to some degree, and also just understand that there has to be a balance, and no matter how hard you work, ultimately your family has to be a priority. And sometimes when we all know as coaches, we get wrapped up in our seasons and our players and our wins and losses in the next game, and it's sometimes easy to lose track of what's really important. So I think it's a credit to you that you're able to be self-aware enough to realize that, hey, my kids, I want to be able to see them play. And that's one of the things that when I stepped away from high school coaching, it's probably been, I don't know, 9 years now since I got out of high school coaching, but my kids were just getting to the age where they were starting to play, and I wanted to be able to see them play. I wanted to be able to go to their events, and and when I was coaching, I was spending time with other people's kids, which I loved, and I loved the process of coaching. But at the same time, I knew that what I really wanted to do was be able to be involved in my own kids' lives. And so for me, I made a decision to stay involved in the game of basketball in a different way. And so for you, obviously you had an opportunity. You wanted to scratch the itch of going and being a college coach and seeing what that world was all about. And now you come back and you're at Pace, and it sounds like from everything that you've said tonight that it's been a great situation for you. So talk about how you ended up at Pace after you left Georgia State. What was that process like?
Again, I wasn't necessarily looking. It just kind of happened. I met with them. They said that they were possibly looking for a basketball coach. And at the time when I did get hired, I actually was not the basketball coach. That happened maybe a month after I had started there, maybe early July. But what Pace has to offer is in realms of the culture of the school, and how it's ran, and how it's just the way they do things. It was a no-brainer for me. My kids will be going to the school. I mean, it'd be great for them. I mean, it was just, to me, for what I was looking for, be able to spend more time with my kids, be able to be in charge of my own schedule, and be able to, be around. And not only that, the mentoring aspect is much more felt, I think, at the high school level than, when you're in college, you're dealing with grown men, basically. So it ain't but so much mentoring you can do, because sometimes you might see them for a couple years, then they might be gone, or they might transfer, or they might go to the NBA. You just don't know. And so here you're going to spend some quality time with some kids, and get to know them, and try to put them on a better path to from where they even from where they were, because a lot of times they're already on a good path, but you want to try to enhance that, and make sure you supplement whatever it is they're getting, and make them even better, not only as players, but as people. And so just the genuineness of that was definitely attractive for me, again, because now I get to get back into my element of mentoring and trying to guide and trying to direct and lead, but at the same time being competitive and trying to put together a really good program.
So do people there in the school community have outsized expectations for you after winning 7 of the last 8 state titles while you were a high school coach?
Well, I definitely think they want to compete and they want to win. But this move was about, I think they wanted to put me in they wanted to put me in place to kind of, stabilize some things, and put them in a better place. I mean, this program has won 2 out of the last 3 state championships, so it wasn't like it was just a bad program. I mean, Wendell Carter was, lottery pick for the Bulls, and he was there, and he was a big part of those 2 championships. But I think they wanted to, see what it was they could do to get the program to another level. And young man that guided them did a great job. Demetrius Smith, I thought he did a phenomenal job, and so I think it's just one of those things where timing, and so I'm there.
There you go, and here you are, right? Ready to kick things off. So as you look at what you're trying to build there, what going forward from the the remainder of what you have left in your season this year, and then in the years ahead, what do you think is going to be the key to you developing the kind of success that you want to have both on and off the floor with your kids?
Just continuing to be that coach that wants to teach them life lessons, and also, as a player, just develop them, continue to develop their game, continue to expose them to different things, continue to get them to work outside of their comfort zone so they can grow, and so the program can grow, and just, again, guiding them through this thing called life, is I consider myself a bridge, to where they want to go, just being that bridge, and trying to, assist them in getting to where they want to be, whether it's basketball or what have you. Because, sometimes everybody's not looking to, everybody don't have NBA dreams. Everybody don't have college basketball playing dreams. Sometimes they just, need that guidance to where direction they're going is. So that's my goal. That's my mission, and it won't change.
All right, let's talk about your own kids. How old are your kids now?
I have a daughter who's 9, and I have a son who's 6.
So are you coaching either of them in any basketball?
No.
No, you're staying out of those waters.
Yeah, for right now, I want to, like my son plays, and I work with him though. I try to teach him about the game. He's very coachable. Right now he is. I hope he stays that way, because I do want to coach him in high school. That was part of this move, so I could kind of like be a part of his, high school career. make sure he's in a good spot without being too overbearing and not being too, overly involved. But yeah, I'm just kind of like, I just kind of watch, and I don't, I don't try to, when we get in the car, I'll tell him a couple of things, but I don't try to make it, the whole topic from the time we leave the gym to the time we get home, because he's young right now, and I want him to still have a love for the game. I don't want it to be I don't want it to be something that he hates when he gets to be 12. I want him to continue to love the game, and he really loves the game right now. And so I want to keep that fresh. I want to keep that alive. And my daughter, she, did competition cheerleading, and she also does dance. But my daughter, she surprised me about 2 weeks ago and said, I want to play basketball. And she's actually taller. So she's, she would be her size is, she's gonna probably be pretty tall. And so just for her to even say that, 'cause she's a girly girl, but for her to say that kind of made my heart kind of, pulled a couple strings of my heart out.
Understood. Yeah, that's funny. It's funny because I have a ninth grade daughter and a seventh grade son and a third grade daughter, and just hearing what you just said is, it's what I've tried to do, and I've coached them at various levels in AAU, and but I try to stay, I try to leave it to them as to how much they want to do it and how much they want to play, and it's a difficult line to tread in terms of, especially when you love the game as much as I can, I know you do, and I know I do, and you want to sometimes push more. But to your point, I think you made a excellent point out there for anybody who's, whether you're a coach that might coach your own kid or whether you're just a parent, and that was that, you don't want to turn them off when they're 9 or 6 or 7, where by the time they get to be age 12, they already dislike the game because they've been pushed and cajoled into doing something that maybe they don't want to do. And so that's the danger of doing things too early. And, of course, we know that there's a lot of, early sports specialization out there that, unfortunately too many parents are pushing kids into. So it's refreshing to hear, again, somebody who has your experience to understand that, kids got to get there on their own. And when we try to force it on them, it just doesn't always work out the way we want it to.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen it as a coach in the high school or, just being in education. You see it every day almost, and for the life of you can't understand, what's wrong with why is this kid not, in tune to, trying to be the best player. But a lot of times they're burnt out. Sometimes they just don't have the love for it. And a lot of that has to do with, sometimes just being, sometimes us as parents just being overbearing, with it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You see, I mean, I'm sure you see it as a high school coach, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of parents that are trying to live their dreams vicariously through their kids, and that ultimately, I think, doesn't end up in the right place. And I always say that, I love basketball. I hope my kids love basketball, but ultimately, the relationship with your kids is the most important thing. And if you become one of those overbearing parents, you end up damaging the relationship. And as much as I love the game of basketball, that relationship with my kids is even more important.
No doubt, man. No doubt. I agree totally. I mean, you can't get those years back, at the end of the day. So you're absolutely right.
That's for sure. All right. Well, Sharm, I want to thank you for jumping on here with us. Before we get out of here, if you wouldn't mind sharing out your contact information where people can get in touch with you. And then if there's anything that we didn't touch on tonight that you want to share kind of as your parting shot, you can go ahead and do that now.
All right. My contact info, I'm on Twitter. That's basically my social media deal. I don't do all the Instagram. Mike Jones has been trying to get me on Instagram. I might do it.
I tried searching you on Instagram to tag you in this post, and I couldn't find you, man.
Yeah,
but I know you're all over Twitter, man. You do a great job on Twitter. I will vouch for you there. So for people in the audience, if you don't follow Sharman, you definitely want to get on there and do that once he shares that out for you.
Yeah, my Twitter is Coach S. White. My email is Sharman, SHARMAN .White at Pace Academy, PACE Academy.org. And the one thing I would want to share, especially with coaches, and I got to do a little 1-minute thing for USA on this, and I'll give y'all a little sneak preview. But I think coaches, when they look at themselves or when they try to prepare and all that stuff, I always tell coaches win practices, players win games. And that's all about preparation. So you got to spend the time, prepare your guys, put them in a good position. That means you got to stay up to, 1 o'clock planning practices out in the morning, or whatever the case might be. You've got to win practices, and then they'll win the games. And so, like, again, that just goes right into how you prepare, how you, get guys ready to play.
Perfect. That's a great way to end it. I can't thank you enough again. Jason, I want to say thanks for jumping on the podcast. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Hello, Hoopheads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.